Are you a starter or are you a finisher? Wait, how can you finish something if you've never started it? Greetings, people of the internet. I'm Scott with Serkworks Art Labs. Welcome, mad creators, to the underground laboratory where we create robots, aliens, zombies, and other imminent threats to humanity. At least we set out to create those things. Whether we finish them, that's a different story. So this whole video is kind of prompted by, I was listening to a podcast and somebody had mentioned something that somebody said about, are you a starter or are you a finisher? Like there's two different, you're either one or the other. And I started to think about that. And at first I was like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think most people fall into one of those two categories. And then I started to think a little more. I'm like, well, what does that actually mean? Because you can't finish something you never started. But I do understand the fact that a lot of people, they really either get into that starting part or they really they get something out of the actual finishing, get something out there. And I don't know where I fall under that, under those two extremes, but I do know that in some cases I do have trouble finishing certain things. Or I'm pretty good at, if it's a deadline or something, I can get that done. But beyond that, like if it's a product or something, if I finish it, sometimes I don't always bring that product to the market, and I'm not really sure why that is. So I'm gonna do a blueprint drawing, and let's kind of talk about this topic because I think there's a lot of discussion to be had. So let's get to it. So are you a starter or are you a finisher? And that's a really interesting, that's a good question, because how do you finish something if you haven't started it? I mean, that's kind of crazy. But speaking of crazy, I just before I kind of get into this topic, I do want to kind of turn your attention to let you guys know what I'm drawing here. This is just sort of a little like psycho robot. It's loosely based on a character I designed for a comic strip that I created many years ago. And I thought it would be kind of cool to turn him into a robot, but he's kind of like a parody of Jason, I guess. But like a Jason slash kind of combined with Wile E. Coyote, where he would, even though he's sort of a homicidal maniac, he everything seems to backfire, and he never ends up really killing anyone, only maiming himself. So it's kind of loosely based on that, but this is sort of a robot version of that character. Anyway, just in case you're interested in what I'm drawing. But anyway, back to sort of the topic. So starting and finishing, and like I said, I was kind of wondering, well, what does that mean? How can you be how can you finish something if you haven't started? But then I guess I started to understand a little more the thinking behind this, because I think it relates more towards working with teams. So if you work at a company, obviously there's people that are a little more apt, or they're a little more conditioned, or they like the act of starting a project or whatever. And then there's other people that maybe somebody else starts a product, but they're really like, oh, I'm going to bring this thing home and just make sure it gets out there and and just wrap it all up in a nice bow and everything. So there's those two different personalities, and obviously with anything it's a spectrum. So you could fall somewhere in the middle or whatever, which I think that's sort of where I would fall. But if you are working, at a company with a team, it does make a lot of sense to get to know who is really good at starting projects, get that ball rolling and everything, and then hand it off to the people that can see it to fruition and everything. So I definitely understand that. But for most of us, people watching these videos, you're probably independent artists, independent entrepreneurs. So that you kind of have to take on both roles. So if you're like me, I need to start things and I need to finish things. So I had to sit down kind of and reflect and think to myself and be honest. What am I really? Am I more of a starter, or am I more of a finisher? And I've started and I've finished a lot of projects, but I think if I had to be totally honest with myself, I think I'm definitely more of a starter. And there's a lot of evidence through this, and this isn't something that I wanted to believe, because I'm known as a fairly productive guy. and I think of myself as a fairly productive guy. But there's a lot of projects that I started that I had never finished, and there's some reasoning behind that and everything. But I started to think my favorite part of creating anything is the concept, is concepting and coming up with ideas and everything. I mean, I've got so many different ideas for different comic books and different stories and all these different things. So many ideas that I'll never get around to. I already have, and sometimes I have to kind of push those aside because I've got a couple really good ideas for comic books that I want to do, but I've got to train myself to be a finisher. I can't change my just redirect everything and go, well, I'm just going to take a break from my comic book Young and the Dead, the one that I'm working on now, to work on this other thing, because I may never get back to it. And so I need to really stay focused on what I'm doing, even though these other ideas I really like. So maybe it makes sense to come up with some of these ideas and partner with somebody else who can kind of finish it, like you would if you were at a company or wherever. Me as the person who's probably a better starter, and then I've got this great idea for a comic or whatever, and then maybe find somebody who might want to take that idea and go through with it, because then you could watch them do it, and they might even be better at that task than you are or that I am. And it would be kind of cool to see how somebody takes an idea of mine and see what they do with it, because I'm very, when I create something, I get very attached to it, and usually I want it just to kind of be mine. I want to be, I want to write, I want to draw, I want, pencil, ink, letter. I want to do the whole thing myself. And I enjoy that, and I enjoy having something in my hand that I can say, I did this. And I remember back with Portfolio, when I was doing, more commission work or more, client work. I really took pride in the fact that everything I showed in my portfolio I did everything. And that's, in some cases, that's a little unusual, because I remember, in going into, trying to get game design projects or whatever, people would be like, okay, so what part of this did you do? And I just would say, yeah, well, I kind of did everything, even though there were certain projects that I partnered with or that I worked as with a team. But usually in my portfolio, I would only show the stuff that I did. Like if somebody else come up with a concept, and then I did the finished version of, say, a character or whatever, I probably wouldn't show that in my portfolio, because I just want to say, yeah, I did this whole thing. Now, that's not necessarily something you have to do, because especially in these larger, in something like game design where a lot of hands touch it, or comics or whatever, you could just as easily say, hey, I'm the inker. I did, somebody else penciled this, but I'm the inker, and then they can see, if they're looking for an inker, they can say, oh, I like your inks or whatever, or if you're penciling or vice versa or whatever. So you don't really need to go that route. For whatever reason, I always wanted to do everything, but maybe I need to kind of get away from that. But the thing that I kept coming back to, as far as realizing that I'm probably more of a starter, is, I've got all these different ideas, and I don't know if I'll ever get around to them. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, that just says a lot. And I also started to think about, I don't read a lot of books. I'll listen to books on tapes and things like that. But for whatever reason, I'm just not good at reading. And I've started so many books that I lost interest or whatever. And it wasn't because the book was bad or anything. I don't know what it is. And some books I would get almost to the end, like the very last chapter. And I don't know why I didn't push through and just finish it, but I just bailed. And I don't know if there was some kind of fear there of finishing. I mean, there definitely is such a thing as fear of finishing, but with books, I don't know. That's another thing that, I could, anytime I ever started a book, I've started a lot of books, but very, very few books have I actually finished. And that's just a weird thing. But yeah, and the other thing is, when you're talking about finishing, what actually is, where is that finish line? Because I've created many products. For instance, just take for instance the Comic Maker toolkit that I designed, and it's, if you're not familiar, it is just, it's there's a starter kit, and then there's like a deluxe version, but it's basically all kinds of digital products that you can use to create comics. And it took the toolkit, the big one, took a long time to create. I've been working on it for a while, so and I kind of, people knew I was working on it, so I kind of built an audience with that and everything. So when I eventually released it, it was somewhat successful. And I think that's part, and this is going into another topic, but building that anticipation for something, so when it's finally done, people are like, oh yeah, I want to do this. Where if I contrast that with another project that I did, which was the last Inktober project, I created this thing called, it was just kind of a series of white ink on black drawings, it was called the Negative Zone. And I thought, the reason why I did this is because before I was doing things like these blueprint drawings. And the problem with the blueprint drawings is it would be hard for me to reproduce these to sell without going like full color. Or, I guess I could reverse it out, print like the blue and just knock the white out, or do something like that. I'm not sure, but I thought if I was to do something similar to this, what you're seeing now with the blueprint drawing, but make it black and white, it would be easier to produce, because black and white is a lot easier to produce than full color. So I thought I could make a series of this, and then at the end I can collect it, and then maybe I can make a project out of it. Now, I finished all the drawings, so in that way you could say, yeah, I finished that project. But to me, it's not just finishing the project, it's actually getting it out to market. And I never did that. And there are some reasons why. I don't think, I decided, at least for now, not to put that out, because I don't think that particular series, for one reason or another, I don't think it generated enough interest that if I did put it out, that enough people would care about it. Whereas with something else like the Comic Maker Toolkit, there were a lot of people that were interested, and it became a bit more successful. So, but I have a real problem. I can finish a project, but finishing the product part of it, that's not my problem. Because I don't think it stops there. I think finishing is actually, getting it out there and promoting this thing and doing all that. And once I finish a product, it's kind of like, I almost like wash my hands of it. And I'm like, oh man, I'm done. I finished it. Yay. But really there's more to it than that. And maybe this is where, I need to turn it over to somebody else to start marketing it. Because one of the reasons why the Comic Maker Toolkit has kind of sold a bunch of copies is because I put it out on these different design marketplaces where people, where these companies, they have the built-in audience and everything, so they can sell it and everything, but they take a huge percentage. Whereas if I just put it on my website, and if I promote that myself, I get a very big cut, because there's a lot of markup you can make on a digital product. You have to take into consideration all the time. Like I said, there was a lot of time going into that. You have to consider that as part of, creating a project, all the time that goes into it. But once you put in that time and everything, once you have the product done, there's a lot of markup on a digital product, and it can be quite profitable. But if you're having to give the majority of that, or like half of that, or the bulk of that, or a good portion of that to one of these marketplaces, you're missing out. So if I was a little better at promoting my own product, and this is something I got to do, I got to put out videos and run ads and do stuff myself. If I can draw send people to my website, that's going to be better for me. So it's not only just finishing the actual product, but it's going beyond there, and actually finishing to me not only means the product, but getting it out there and letting people know about it and everything. So, how do you start and how do you finish it? Well, one of the things that I always tell people is, how do you start? This is going to sound kind of crazy, but how do you start? Just start, And what do I mean by that is that a lot of people worry about, I got to get all my ducks in a row before I start this project and everything. But you don't need to have all your ducks in a row. You can kind of wrangle your ducks as you go, so to speak. And this kind of came to a head recently. I got a comment on an old video. I mean, I'm talking, this video is probably 6 years old. One of my very first video, and you know, I was holding it and my hands were shaky, and I was filming how I did some of these props, built some of these props for my comic book convention booth and everything. And I got a comment saying, "Oh, you're gonna make me barf. You know, you're just hold the camera down," and everything like that. So it's kind of one of those kind of nasty comments. But I recognize that that video back then was pretty bad, and it was really shaky, and I could see where that guy or girl, whoever made the comment, was coming from. However, you know, I kind of responded back and said, you know, that advice would have been real helpful 5 years ago when I made this video. But the reason why I keep these old videos up is so I can point to people and say, hey, just start and you'll get better as you go. Don't worry about trying to get everything perfect in the beginning. You just need to start. And if you look at those old videos and you see where I am now, I'm a lot more comfortable on camera. I mean, those old videos, I wasn't even on camera. I would just show what I was doing. And again, the camera was shaking and everything like that. But as I went, I learned and I got better and better and better and better. But the most important thing is just start, because if I waited till I got everything perfect, I would have never started. So just start and then kind of, you know, and redirect as you go, and you will improve and everything like that. So the most important thing with starting is just start. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but you know, when you hear what I'm talking about as far as that, what I mean by that, hopefully you'll understand. The other thing is, you know, you want to definitely budget your time and your energy. You want to make sure that you have enough of that, you know, both of those things, because that's super important. And you want to do like one piece at a time. Like, I don't know if you've ever like gone on a jog and or if you're just starting to work out, maybe you're jogging and then, you know, you're looking at that finish line. Oh, it's so far away. But if you say, oh, I see that lamppost over there. If I can just get to that lamppost, and you get to that lamppost, and you go, okay, the next lamppost or the next thing, and then if instead of making that finish line the goal, each one of these little markers is the goal, and gradually they'll add up. So it's kind of like, you know, it's like what I do with my comic book Young and the Dead. If I and I've talked about this before, but if I had the goal of I'm going to create this, you know, 300-page graphic novel, I would never get it done. But since I decided, you know what, I'm gonna, you know, eventually I want to get the full novel done, the graphic novel, or the trade, or whatever you want to call it. But I'm gonna break it up into single issues, just because that's a benchmark for me to hit. The next tip when it comes to starting and finishing is have a hard deadline, because if you don't have that deadline, it's just not going to get done. It's like there's this old saying that if you want to get something done, give it to the person that doesn't have time to do it, because you will make time. If something needs to be done, if you've got a hard deadline, you're going to do what it takes to get that thing done. It's also important to have a person or people that can hold you accountable. If you've watched the 48-hour art check that I do on Mondays with Corey Kerr and Joshua Kimball, you know that's what that's all about. Those guys help keep me on task and everything and make sure I get things done. So find somebody like that. And just, it's really important to get people in your life on that same page and let them know that whatever this project is you're trying to finish, that it's super important to you, and make sure that they know that. And kind of, you know, try to make whatever it is you're trying to complete non-negotiable. This is something that I need to do, barring like any natural disaster, anything crazy like that, or family emergency or something like that. This is something I need to do. So, you know, these are just a few things that I try to take into consideration. But like I said, even though I thought I was really good at this on reflection, there's a lot of things that I sort of need to work on to be a better finisher. Yeah, and if you have, maybe again, starting's your problem, but just remember some of those things. Don't worry to get everything. You don't have to get everything perfect or anything like that. Just get started and figure it out as you go. That's the way I did it, and you know, so as far as like with this YouTube channel, but it's relatable to probably any project, no matter what it is. But anyway, so those are some tips, just some stream of consciousness, some things I'm thinking about as far as, are you a starter? Are you a finisher? And yeah, so speaking of finishers, I'm about to finish this guy. This is my Psycho Robot. Yeah, this brings up back some memories because, like I said, he's really based a lot on another character that I created a long, long time ago. So hopefully you enjoyed that, and let me know if this stuff works for you. Okay, so there you have it. Another blueprint drawing down, another discussion finished, but it's not really finished because I think we can talk about this more in the comment section. There's tons of things to talk about when it comes to starting and finishing. Do you have trouble starting? Do you have trouble finishing? Do you have trouble with the whole thing? I'd like to know in the comment section. Let me know. We can talk about it, and I will see you guys later. That is all. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like what you saw and you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Also, you can follow me at Serkworks on social media, and now you can support the work that I do on Patreon. If you like making comics, then go to Serkworks.com and pick up the Comic Maker Starter Kit. It's packed full of fonts, brushes, templates, and more, and best of all, it's totally free.